the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of Industry BOI, Mr. Olukaide Pito, took over the mantle of leadership at the Bank of Industry, he made a strong commitment that the bank will intervene in various segments of the Nigerian economy to ensure all-inclusive economic growth and development. In pursuit of this agenda, the bank entered into strategic partnerships with reputable development facilitating institutions with a view to jointly taking steps towards accelerating Nigeria's industrial and economic development. It was in this regard that the Bank of Industry signed a $200 million Nigerian Content Intervention Fund, NCI Fund Memorandum of Understanding with Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, NCDMB. According to the Managing Director of BOI and the Executive Secretary of NCDMB, Engineer Simbi Wabote, the fund will help to solve the funding challenges of local supply chain in the oil and gas industry. On tonight's episode of BOI Impact, we shall be featuring Mr. Samuel Aranonu, the Executive Director of Large Enterprises at the Bank of Industry, under whose purview the NCI Fund lies. Welcome to today's edition of BOI Impact. I am Hadiza Olaoshi, because the program will continue after the break. Don't go away. The Nigerian Content Intervention Fund is a pool made available by the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, NCDMB, to meet funding needs of manufacturers, service providers, and other key players in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The NCIF fund will be accessible to eligible players at single-digit interest rate. The fund is sourced from the Nigerian Content Development Fund, NCDF, created by Section 104 of the Nigerian Oil and Gas Development Act. The Bank of Industry will serve as the custodian and manager. The NCDMB and BOI collaboration is based on BOI's expertise and specialization as a development bank created to speed up the industrialization of the Nigerian economy. Tell us about the federal government's Local Content Act 2010.
The Local Content Initiative is a federal government initiative. You know, if there's local production of anything, there will be jobs for it. And anything you produce outside Nigeria, you are exporting jobs. And the paradox of the oil and gas sector has been that whereas about 95% of Nigeria's foreign exchange comes in through the export of crude oil and gas, ironically, the impact of the oil and gas sector on the GDP is very small. In fact, oil and gas contributes about 8% to GDP. Now, what does that tell you? That's the irony of it all. Now, 95% foreign exchange comes from crude and gas, contribution to GDP below 10%. Whereas the agricultural sector contributing less than 1% to our foreign exchange, whereas GDP, it contributes over 30%. So where are the jobs? The jobs are in the GDP. The jobs are what you produce locally. And that's why the impact of the oil and gas sector in terms of GDP, in terms of job creation, has never been felt for many years in the past, which is why what drove the initiative to be able to localize the activities in the oil and gas sector. And that's what informed the enactment of the law in 2010, the Local Content Act. Many people don't know that this act has been there all these years, but it required someone to be able to drive it. You know, I want to commend the current leadership of NCDMB, led by Engineer Simbi Wabote, who has given life to the act, who has really been able to bring it to put it into action, to enforce it. And in the last 3 or 4 years, there has been a major enforcement of that act. And that has led to Bank of Industry being signed on as the bank that will be able to implement the financing aspect of the Local Content Act. Do it. And we are very glad we now have been appointed. And in the last 2 years, we have been able to disburse over 130 million US dollars, to local players to be able to equip them and help in-country operations.
Has this, in a way, helped to reduce demand on Forex?
I'll just give you an example of labor. A lot of the local labor input would have been outsourced outside this country. They would have been paid in US dollars. They would have remitted their money and would have traveled with their money. But the local people who have the skills and competencies, they are doing the job. They are being paid in local currency. The same thing applies to the area of the extraction of crude oil, the E&P. If you go to E&P, most of the onshore operations, most of the swamp operations that are today handled by Nigerians, most of the engineers working there are Nigerians. So there's massive saving in foreign exchange. And you see, the greatest source of foreign exchange saving is that the earnings of these companies are kept here in Nigeria because they are local companies. Just imagine that 10% of the crude oil, we do about 2 million barrels per day today. Just imagine 200,000 barrels, which is being produced by Nigerians, onshore swamp. Every earning in that money, the whole dollars, even though it's earned in foreign exchange, is repatriated back to Nigeria. Whereas if it was done by foreign companies, that money will take a flight almost as soon as it's earned. In fact, no portion, or only a little portion to meet local working capital will be kept in Nigeria. So the strategy is to be able to empower Nigerians to take control as much as we are capable of doing using international standards.
So far, has this led to job creation?
The jobs that we used to export, we are having them locally. It's something that gladdens everyone's heart. Over 20% of the crude oil produced in this country today, I understand from statistics I saw, are produced by Nigerians. That's just the way to go. This is the only way to create jobs. If extractive industry has to be handled by people who are capable of doing that. They started with downstream, they moved onshore, then they moved to swamps. The next place to go will be offshore. Now I hear from the statistics I saw, NCDMB is targeting that by 2025, that close to 40% of the crude oil in the country will be handled by Nigerians. This is the only way until you have in-country operations by Nigerians. That's the only, you cannot have the jobs. We cannot continue to have people who are capable of doing it without empowering them. Malaysia was like us in the 70s. They had zero local content. But today, Malaysia has 100% local content. This is the way Nigeria is going. We are leaders in Africa today in local content, and other countries are coming to learn from us. We just have to keep on going until we get to the destination.
How is BOI and NCDAB assisting players overcome challenges that may come their way?
Initially, we had some challenges at the very beginning, because of the fact that with any startup arrangement, there will be some hitches. There were issues of awareness about how the NCF fund works. So many banks didn't understand it, and so many of the customers didn't know how to apply. That was the initial, teething problems, but we have overcome that. in the last 18 months, which is why we have been able to ramp up disbursement from less than $10 million to about $130 million in about 18 months. What have we been able to do? Nothing outside the MOU we signed with the NCDMB. We actually have a portal, that was created, designed for purposes of application, for the funds. So most of the customers, they know that the process involves applying online. And when you apply online, we have a policy agreement with NCDMB. Within 45 days of the application, the customer must either get a yes or a no. So even within the bank, we have devised a different process to ensure that it runs at that speed that was agreed with NCDMB. Right now, we have not had any major complaints. With that portal, we can monitor all applications. The process is automated, and it's extremely transparent, as with anything that had to do with Bank of Industries. If you speak to all the players, they will tell you, they don't see anybody. They don't need to know any director or any CEO of Bank of Industry. They just apply. If you meet the requirements, one of which is that you must be a contributor to the fund, and you must have a number. If you meet the requirements, you just apply. And if you apply in 45 days, you can get your loan approved. And we disburse immediately to the bank, that is, to your commercial bank. This is what we have done in the last 18 months. And all we hear, is commendations, from people who have received. And we have several other new applications that we are processing. And we are trusting God that they will all go through, very quickly. This fund is the cheapest fund available for players in the oil and gas sector. I mean, at a time when you know that if you go to any of the deposit money banks, that you'll be getting loans at price at about over 21% per annum. Here is one fund that allows you to have access to loans at 8% per annum. All inclusive. There's no fee, everything, just straight 8% per annum interest. Whether you are borrowing in local currency or you are borrowing in foreign currency, USD, it's same 8% per annum. And it provides that you can't get anything that is cheaper than that in this country, anywhere else, and that's what we provide. Many people don't know that we provide that. And it's diverse. You want to do equipment finance, you want to bring in assets, 8% per annum for a tenure of up to 5 years, depending on what the cash flow can be able to indicate to us about how you can pay back. You want to do refinancing of existing exposure you have to the commercial banks, you can come to us. We will refinance it at the same 8%. And in this situation, everybody is a winner. When we refinance it, we practically bring in the risk asset to our own books and provide the liquidity to the commercial banks, who will have access to dollar for 5 years that they can use to do several other businesses they want to do. At the same time, the customer is a winner too. The customer himself, rather than paying a very high interest rate, is paying only 8%. So at the end of it all, everybody is a winner, including Nigerian Content Development Management Board that midwife this process. So that's, of course, we have another fund, what we call contract finance, which is used to provide, funding at the same 8% for up to 5 years, depending on what the cash flow can support, for those who have contracts with any of the IOCs. We finance such at 8% per annum. But then there's another one we have that provides funding for community contractors. The community contractors can take, up to 20 million naira, at a very, very low interest rate, of 5%. Those ones are the ones who we want to take more advantage of this. And the last one is the manufacturing for those who want to set up fabrication yards and manufacture locally. Again, they can have access to the funds at the same 8% up to 5 years tenure.
Welcome back. You would agree with me that the NCI fund that was designed to increase indigenous participation in the oil and gas industry, build local capacity and competences, is gradually achieving that. Sit back as we bring you testimonies from some of the beneficiaries of the fund, as well as interview with the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, Engineer Simbi Wabote.
We are one of the first to even have that fund to acquire new ballistic vessels that we are using to work right now. I can say that for you to have that's running into millions of dollars, that means you must be a big player in the game. So with that support, it means that they have pushed us to that level. So what Bank of Industry is doing for us now, making us get good equipment. So it is making us to be in strategic position to always have jobs.
What I've seen with the NCI fund is very clear. It's a very, very good mode of deploying these funds, taking a part of NCDF and domiciling it with Bank of Industry. Bank of Industry is in position to manage this. And I can tell you that when we applied, we knew what it would take to get it in terms of qualification. Our own application was meant to have funds to add to the funds we are using for project delivery, and also to help us inject funds in our total basket of facilities we take from the banks. When you have the ability to finance your projects, it gives you also the possibility to increase your scope of activities.
Prior to now, a lot of companies were aware of it, but didn't even realize they could benefit from it or how to go about it. Everybody assumed that the process would be so cumbersome and, you know, are you sure you will really get it? You know, the Nigerian factor came into play there. However, we found out to be quite the opposite. What it states on the website is exactly what you're required to bring. As far as you have the right documentation, certification, the process was quite, I must say, it's one of the easiest process we've had to go through when it comes to gaining funds. And of course, the local banks are currently doing 2 digits, while the NTI fund was running to 1 digit. So that was a huge, huge plus.
If you have good intentions, you make good decisions. And I think that's the concept of BOI and the NCI fund. It's just too transparent. If you submit the necessary requirement, you get it. I used to tell people that. You don't need to know Mr. A or Mr. B or somebody from somewhere to help you to achieve this. And the system is very, very transparent. We got the fund because of this vessel, to upgrade our vessels, make it competitive with others in the system. And that's what we are doing now.
The fact that we can get big money, long term, structured in such a way that it is convenient for the bank as well as the recipient like us to come to terms as to how best to deploy that money and how to make sure that the money, ultimately is used for the purpose it is obtained for, and it is at the same time over time returned with sufficiency of whatever interest back to the bank. So this is the difference that this whole opportunity has brought when you compare it to if we had to go to a commercial bank to go and borrow money. I can tell you it's a very, very painful exercise.
Collaboration is key to success in anything that any agency of government does. Interagency collaboration is very important. We had that with Bank of Industry. We learned through the ropes. We beat ourselves to pulp at times just to have an alignment, but I think it's the best way to go. And then secondly, interventions like this, because generally, because of government focus on so many other sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, there are interventions here and there with CBN for funds, even recently again, the creative industry. But there are no interventions for those who participate in the oil and gas sector. So this itself is an intervention for them, as it were. And then thirdly, I think local content practice needs to be backed up by some intervention for it to be successful as such. And from the NCDMB standpoint, this is one intervention that we brought to bear that have seen us, to a large extent, move the needle in local content attainment in the country.
That brings us to the end of today's program, which clearly shows the developmental strides that are being taken by the management of the Bank of Industry and the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board in ensuring that local players participate fully in the oil and gas sector. With all hands on deck, with the right attitude and bold determination, the challenges facing the oil and gas sector will be a thing of the past. The sky will be the beginning for our dear country, Nigeria. You heard testimonies from some beneficiaries, which I hope has motivated you to get moving. For us at the Bank of Industry, we shall continue to support federal government's efforts at transforming Nigerian economy into an industrialized one. You do not need to know anyone at BOI to access its funds. Just walk into any of BOI's offices in your state or log onto our website for further information. Thanks for watching today's episode of BOI Impact. It's good evening and have yourself a wonderful week. I am Hadiza Olaoshibiko. Bye for now.